I'm just testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, Miss Hauser, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Let's try something else. That works too, right?
Yes, ma'am, I can see you. Can you see
Very
the screen?
good. I can. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for setting this up at the last minute.
Well, shout out goes to your technology team. I'm just here to help to connect the dots. But yes,
Shout out to the technology team. I see Joseph. I see Ryan. Every time, Joseph, every time you show up, I think about COVID.
mm,
Hi, Miss Howard. How's it going?
Okay, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good. Remember those days when you were trying to keep us going? That was quite a time.
Yep.
That was quite a time.
hmm
Good evening, Ms. Hauser. Thank you for the shout out.
You bet. You bet. And Ryan, I will admit, I just got a 2 month delay on Lumos. So if my camera goes off, it's going to be because I'm getting an unstable connection. But right now, everything in my house is off except this computer. So,
got it.
I may be in your house in about 20 minutes, Ryan.
Welcome. I went ahead, and got a gig connection, so I
I
got
heard.
plenty of bandwidth.
Oh
Yeah,
man, I'm
rub it
jealous,
in.
man. I'm jealous. I'm only at 400 gigabits, and I'm like, I'm itching. I want the gig. I want it.
Well, Will told me that Churton Grove is getting Lumos,
Oh,
which is
there
a,
to
they
go now.
already had Spectrum, and down here I'm at bright speed at 3 megabytes per second, at the whopping speed of 3 megabytes per second.
Oh my. Yeah, I don't think I can survive that, Miss Hauser. I mean, I've been getting oh, what's the satellite one? I'd probably be getting that. There's no way I can handle that.
Yeah, I had that. I had that for a while. It's not very good.
No, even
Yeah.
it didn't work.
And now, Starlink is getting better because they're throwing more satellites up.
Hmm.
A bunch of my neighbors have Starlink, but I keep thinking that Lumos is going to be here. And so I think they're saying February now. So it's supposed to be June, then it got moved to December, and now it's February.
Gotcha. Because I feel like I thought you told me it was they were running the lines down your driveway.
Oh, what they did is they ran conduits. If you go all over the county, they run these orange conduits, but
That's what those are. Oh, okay.
they haven't connected any fiber. And I would have been happy with a cell tower because even after they do this, my cell service isn't great either. So there's that.
Yeah.
So
AT&T, what AT&T and Verizon, what do you have out there?
we have both. AT&T is a little better, so I'm on AT&T.
Hmm, gotcha. Yeah, I got Verizon. It's been I've been fairly pleased with it since I moved here, so I'm not complaining.
It's different in different parts of the county. Now everybody pretty much has service. It's just there are some parts that don't have enough cell towers.
Yeah, coverage doesn't split all the way across. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and then with the mobile networks, what happens is, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I understand it, the mobile networks, when you go to rush hour, you get lots of competition for the bandwidth. So the residential users get kicked off. So someone told me I should switch to a low entry level
Business
commercial
plan.
plan.
Yeah, commercial
Yeah.
plan. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Up area beside audio, and what is selected as your microphone?
um, microphone array.
Okay, that's the right one. And then, so if you hit the little icon there that looks like a mic with a red line on it, if you click that, does it make your mic hot?
It's hot now.
We can hear you.
We hear you, Ann.
Okay, they hear me.
We hear you. Welcome.
Thank
Right.
you. I couldn't get my microphone to work because I was doing the wrong thing.
Oh,
Imagine.
I see Mr. Richmond, Dr. Jones, Mr. Davis. Who else we
Yeah,
got?
man.
There we go. Dr. Pack.
Nobody wants to hear that, Mr. Richmond.
Oh, it's gonna say,
We've been
how
up
was
there
it?
freezing.
I'm surprised you came back.
I am too. I just got back in probably 1 o'clock this morning in Raleigh.
Oh, wow.
Dang.
Well, you came home to some cold weather. That
I
was a
did.
good way to wake up.
I came home to a punch in the gut.
You're supposed to say a brisk winter day.
Yeah.
Uh,
We're happy that you're back safe and sound.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back, honestly. I mean, Jamaica was beautiful. The food was great. And I enjoyed it, but I was ready to come back home, especially my wife complaining about seeing her dog.
Well, I was gonna say, I bet Oreo was happy to have you back.
Yes, he was.
well, Andre, I adopted Skipper.
Did you really?
I did you. He's mine.
Congratulations.
He's sitting right here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
That's good.
he's a good boy. These golden doodles are killers. They're really great dogs.
They are.
So.
Hello.
Welcome, Miss Padilla.
Thank
Hello,
you.
how are you?
Okay.
You staying warm?
Yes. How about you?
I'm trying. It's better. It's better. It's gonna be okay.
Good.
Spring's coming. Spring is on the horizon. I know it is.
You're right, Ann. And the days are, you can notice that the days are getting longer. So that's a good thing too, right? More light.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So we have 4 minutes and Sarah's still. We have everybody with Sarah. Mike, oh, Will's not on yet either. Sarah and Will.
Yeah, we're about 3 minutes, everyone. Looks like Miss Doyle is on as well.
Yep. All right.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome, Miss Doyle.
Good to see you. I'm just printing my document, so I'm gonna step away real quick.
Sounds good.
I didn't see. And Rhonda's not on yet either. I saw Fred, Rhonda.
Franklin, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My screen does not want to go up and down to show me the agenda.
Oh, I'm sharing screen. So
Okay.
this is
Okay.
me. I'm controlling that. Yeah. I'll be driving behind the scenes for everybody presenting tonight. I just got an email from Miss Smiley. Her machine is doing an update. She said she'd be on in a minute.
Okay, good.
And Miss Rath is out sick, so I will be filling in for her this evening.
Okay.
And Dr. Pack, if there are questions for her, she's not feeling well either, so she probably won't turn her camera on, just a FYI.
Okay.
I'm sorry, everybody's so sick.
The thing to do then, Dr. Pack, is just say, oh, my internet connection's not going well. I'm going to turn my camera off. Works great.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And if my camera, right now, everything's good, famous last words, but if my connection gets unstable, I will turn my camera off. I apologize in advance if that happens.
And if anybody asks, this is also being streamed on YouTube. I just got confirmation that it's live and up.
Great.
Sounds good.
So, for everybody in the public, now that we know, I guess I'm not able to print in my home computer, printer, so, but I do have the file and I looked at it. So I can go ahead and add the printer to this computer, even though it belongs to you. I don't want to add any of my personal stuff to the computer personally.
I guess that would be a Ryan question.
Okay, I will
That-
talk to Ryan, or
that-
I will
that's
send
a-
an email to Dr. Jones. Okay, thanks.
That's good.
And so have we heard from Will? Has anyone heard from Will? I have not.
I have not.
I can message him.
Hey, Wendy, I end up printing the documents from my personal computer. I kind of go through this extra step per your question. I don't know that it matters, but
Thank you. I rather not.
Yeah, I
send it to
gotcha.
you. Yeah, I like to walk a fine line between personal and work. Thank you.
Yeah, I try to keep them separate too, but when it comes to printing, it's hard for me to print from the board computer.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Is Will? Will just came on. And you said Sarah needed a minute, Franklin?
She said her machine was updating looks like about 2 minutes ago. So said she would join as soon as the machine is updated.
Okay, that hurt. Do you want to do we want to go ahead and start? We have a lot to cover, and then we can get through at least the agenda, the minutes, and see if she'll come on by then. Is that okay, everybody? Or do you want to give her 5 more minutes? What do you all want? What's the pleasure?
She's joining now.
Ah, there we go. Great.
Hey there. Yeah, I was about to text Franklin and say, don't wait for me.
Got it. Welcome to Smiley.
Thanks, Sarah. Glad you're on. Hey, so let's get started. I'll call the meeting to order. Bam. And thank you all. I just want to thank you all for coming and for your flexibility with rescheduling and with shifting to virtual. And today, our big goal today is to get everybody's input on the the 10-year CIP. And then we'll talk a little bit about bond projects and budgets. And I think, as you all know, that our goal is to get the CIP ready for Monday, so it could be approved and then go on to the county. So why don't we start agendas? Franklin, can you put up the whole agenda? Okay, is everybody okay with the agenda? If I get a motion, do I have to roll call on this? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, can I, motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, roll call. I'm gonna go first name alphabetical. Andre,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, and then the minutes. So the agenda's approved. Minutes. Any comments or questions about the minutes?
No.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, roll call. Let's go in reverse. Will,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Andre,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so we're approved. So let's go right into the CIP, and Fred, do you want to take us through that?
Good evening, board members, Madam Chair. Before I begin, Dr. Jones, would you want to summarize anything prior to diving into the material?
Nope, I think you got it.
All right. And please forgive me, virtual is kind of my kryptonite. I like to see face-to-face interactions and know that what I'm speaking, you have any questions, I kind of read body language. So if I need to stop, I guess raise your hand, or I'll try my best to pause for additional comments concerning our slides. Franklin will help us navigate this. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to our operations team. Even though school was not in session today and tomorrow, our team have been essential in making sure when it's safe for students and staff to arrive, that we have the necessary entrances and roadways safe and clear. And so I just want to make a point of privilege to thank our whole entire operations team, from safety, security, knowing the weather reports, transportation, maintenance, and even child nutrition, because we still have deliveries that happen even when we're not in school. So the coordination that goes along with that. And so thank you. Next slide, please. We are here to talk about a couple of things, bring you up to date on our capital spending and how it is allocated by Orange County municipality, provide updates on the current capital projects that are on the capital improvement plan list, provide some information of why the numbers that you saw on that capital improvement plan is formally referred to as a cash flow, providing you guidance on why we use cash flows and the importance when doing a capital improvement plan, and also providing you an update on the projects that are in the capital improvement plan that are significantly funded through bonds that were approved in November of 2024. Next slide, please. We want to always have our mission and vision at the forefront of all that we do. And so we just want to highlight that the mission here at OCS is to prepare every learner for lifelong service and success, while educating students in a safe, inclusive environment where we engage, challenge, and inspire them to reach their maximum potential. Next slide, please. So now we will just go over briefly how the county has financed our capital improvement and our spending. Next slide, please. And so it is imperative that we know a little bit to be dangerous about where our funding comes from. And because what we don't want to happen is the narrative that we just received a bond and what individuals think bond funds should be supporting or not necessarily being supported in that manner. However, we would do a great job, as you will see in our transparency, while laying out the various buckets, as you see here, from county financing being, bond, which is the majority of the funding, supplemental deferred maintenance, recurring capital, lottery funds, some debt financing, and Article 46 tax proceeds. As highlighted in the cash flow that was sent, these are going to be on a year-by-year basis. Again, all of these funding sources are tied to the county revenue sources. And so we can only forecast for the year that we're going into, as things may become different year to year on a year-to-year basis. And that's why the capital improvement plan is for a 10-year, but every year we will look to reevaluate and analyze it based on the funding sources provided to us by the county. Next slide, please. So again, this is further reiterating where the $212 million of capital funding over the next 10 years will be appropriated and what those sources of funds will be used for. And so mainly a majority of those will be for our high capital needs, such as a new school, replacement school, and comprehensive renovations to our building portfolio, as well as satisfying some of our other priorities, such as life safety, making sure we have adequate ADA accessibility, upgrades to our hardware and lighting, as well as making some of the life cycle system improvements like roofs, furniture, fixtures, playgrounds, and then continue to improve our indoor air quality by changing out the major components such as chillers, boilers, and HVAC controls. Next slide, please. And so there was some monies from last year's budget that rolled over. And as we continue to be transparent in how we're spending, we had approximately 26 million from the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 budget to roll over, with an additional 15 million provided to us by the county and fiscal year 24-25, which totaled to an amount of $41 million in capital funding provided to us. Of that 41 million, 19 million is in projects that are currently encumbered, meaning that we have contracts involved in all of those projects that are wrapping up or should have been wrapped up as we speak, as well as we have 11 million in new projects that we'll speak specifically on later on in the slide deck, as well as we have some projects that are pending approval, some that you have already approved of that total amounts of $10 million. So we do have a plan, and we thank the county for the funds that we have been allocated, and it looks like we're on the right track to make sure that we are excellent and efficient in our capital spending. Next slide, please. So here's a current update that spans 2 fiscal years. We're currently in fiscal year 2025, getting ready for fiscal year 2026. So here's a couple of updates that we have for you on the projects that are currently underway. Next slide, please. And so we have the second phase of the Orange High School renovations, some restrooms, band rooms, just some major life cycle improvements, paint, fixtures, and equipment. Along with that project, we will also be paving the soccer lot and the staff lot and a Orange High School paving project. The New Hope Elementary School building envelope, which considers the roof, was approved last month, and we will be starting that mid-spring, summer. That project is a duration of 180 days from notice to proceed. The Cedar Ridge High School Ag Building, we are going through the necessary zoning requirements by the County Planning Department. We are currently on track to bid that work out this spring around March, April, in hopes to start construction early summer. Really excited at that project. We've had some community engagements, and what we have heard so far is that everyone is positive and ready for the exciting structure at Cedar Ridge High School. We're continuing the second phase of Efflin Cheeks interior upfit. Administration has been pleased, and that has been going smooth for the transition of moving from one phase to the other with little children. You could imagine the work that has to go to navigating that. Kudos to the principal there at Efflin Cheeks. And then as we continue to make sure that we're safe, there were 2 properties that did not have secure vestibules. That was Pathways Elementary, as well as Partnership Academy. And so we've hired engineers and designers to come up with an efficient way to secure vestibules for entry, making sure people are where they're supposed to be, safe and sound. We will be a part of the life cycle renovating ALS Standback Middle School with HVAC renovations, mainly the air handler units, which control the amount of air, heat, and cooling that come out. We're replacing 8 of those units. That work should begin this summer as well. It is in the design procurement stage at this point. And then we are constantly improving our technology by upgrades to our intercom systems that are outdated and need to be replaced. Next slide, please. So capital improvement plan, each year we have to bring our capital improvement plan to the county that showcase the amount of funding that we think will be required for the projects that are currently slated on our list. Next slide, please. And so the importance of a cash flow is twofold, right? It helps us manage our debt financing. It prioritizes our projects. It helps us monitor our financial health and ensures sustainability and transparency as well as accountability. When you talk about managing debt financing, we get our majority of our funding will be from bonds, which are loans. And so ensure that we give the county the proper information of when their debt obligations will be upon them. A cash flow is beneficial to making sure that we're aligned with the county, as well as it helps us, again, to prioritize our needs. The cash flow helps us prioritize what are urgent, what are maybe safety concerns, and what may be educational benefits. And it also, again, monitors the financial health. Each year that we do the cash flow, the revenue sources and the funding sources may change. And so as we see that, as well as we continue to match the cost of construction, some things may teeter to another fiscal year, given whatever the financial health is of the county at that time. And then, of course, sustainability is a major factor that helps with energy efficiency, long-term cost savings of when we replace certain equipment and fixtures. And what's most important is the transparency and accountability. This will show the community as the board where we're spending our money, when certain facilities are being touched, so that we are equitable in our capital dollar spending. Next slide, please. All right. So bond planning. Next slide. So congratulations, we received 125 million of the bond that was voted on by citizens in 2024, which states that we will look to build one new replacement elementary, Orange Middle School improvements, and new additions and comprehensive renovations district-wide that support school adequacy and 21st century learning. I'll bring this to your attention because we're at the stage now where if the priorities need to be realigned, our goal is by the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, we will provide direction to the county on the first project that would be a part of the 125 million over 10 years. Once that decision is made, the other projects that are on this list will be reevaluated each year as we continue with the first project, as fundings may be different, as well as priorities of the board may change. And so while these projects have been stated as where we will move forward, it is the board who can ultimately determine whether or not these are the three projects that fully come to fruition over the next 10 years. Next slide. So whenever, again, we want to always keep to the forefront that when we're looking at our bond outcomes and the decisions that we make, we want to make sure that we're always looking to enhance our teaching and learning environments, advancing the student and educational outcomes. We want to make sure that we improve our school utilization, provide students with flexible spaces necessary for multiple learning styles. I want to make sure that we have school adequacy by updating our classroom spaces to meet the tools of new educational standards, and right-sizing our portfolios to make sure that we can provide the support staff like child nutrition and transportation to the facilities that we have in the district, while making sure we invest in our community that attracts and retains residents by providing competitive schools. Next slide. So as we gear towards doing the work, planning, engagement, and development, here is a forecast of where we'll need your support as well as the community to get all stakeholder engagement. And so right now, January of this year, we're looking at doing some feasibility studies and informational gathering on some of our existing facilities, as well as what would be scenarios that would be feasibility for Orange County schools. We will still continue that planning in February and March. Again, bringing you data that talks about cost feasibility based on NCDPI standards of renovations and demolitions, as well as more information through our data collection that provides you scenarios on feasibilities on what will be the first project for Orange County of the 2024 bond. And then along the late fall, winter and spring, we will have opportunities to review that data with many stakeholders, yourselves, as well as community and administration, who impact the lives of students in the built environment on a day-to-day basis. The ultimate goal is in May, based on that information and data collection and presentations, that the board would have a project that will be lifted to the county for our first project using 2024 bond funds. Next slide, please. So again, here's just a project timeline of where we are and where we want to be, keeping us on target. Again, we're in fiscal year 2025, and so now we're doing the work of planning and engagement and the feasibility of our bond options and projects. Once that has been established, we will begin with the planning and design of what that project is by procuring designers and engineers, as well as the board making resolutions and decisions on what type of delivery method. We put this here because we cannot determine what the delivery method would be until we know what that project is. There are several projects that could come to the surface, and there are several delivery methods that have pros and cons based on that project will be determined. But once that's been determined, of the total project budget, that requires around 10% of those finances. And the majority, which is 80%, the bidding construction, will happen between the fiscal years of 2026 and 2029. Most elementary schools are around 24 months. And so we've factored that into our timeline. And then the last part is the 10%, the closeout, making sure we have furniture, fixture, equipment, and the resources so that the school can open on day one. After that is finished, we would then reevaluate where we are with bond funding. Perhaps during that time, there may be some priorities that the board would like to lift up to the forefront, as well as our schools will continue to age. And so there may be some other priorities, given the facility ages of our whole portfolio, that may rise to the surface at that time. Either way, it would be recommended that a new facility condition assessment be performed at that time to make sure that we're equitable in decisions on what projects to support after this project is complete. Next slide, please. And so here are a couple of factors that we can kick off that we know will be considered when we determine what that project is. Land availability. And so whether we look to build on an existing site that Orange County Schools currently owns, or whether we have to look for a green site. This means that additional costs out of that total 125 million will have to be incorporated in the decisions that this board makes, as well as are we at standards? We don't want to design anything that is below the standard of NCDPI, and so we want to make sure that whatever we're designing conforms to the educational adequacy and standards of the state of North Carolina. The decisions also will include capacity, how big, where's the growth. Looking at data like SATFO will help us determine and understand those decisions that will impact our capacity, as well as our overall operations portfolio and management. Again, as we make sure, I like to use right sizing the district, we want to make sure we can support students and staff with those other operational needs, such as child nutrition, transportation, and athletics or extracurricular activities. And so the decision of where that school and what that school is, taking in those operational management into factors in consideration will also be important, as well as overall just operation efficiency. Is it going to be feasible? And so we're working with a third-party consultant, a design engineer, to look at all of these factors and maybe more through this discussion that you would like us to look at, to bring with you in the months ahead kind of a scenario-based decision that would help you perhaps get to where we ultimately want to be and kicking off a project fiscal year 2026. Swing space, whether it is an existing building, where do the students go that may be in that building during the interim 2 to 3 year time frame. School scheduling, we have two types of school scheduling, year round and as well as our traditional. So those also have to be factoring, as well as always our budget. And they're not making any more land, and the economy is continuing to move in a direction where cost and time will be important. And then again, as we talked about, our project delivery method. And so depending on the project, the time, the scope, there are various delivery methods that we can bring before this board and determine through a resolution based on what that project is, what type of project delivery method the board would like to use. And so with that, next slide, please, Mr. Franklin. We'll leave it there for discussion. I know that was a lot, and I apologize if I may have gone over it fairly quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions from this presentation, and if you were questions from the CIP that you received earlier this week or last week. Thank you.
So do you want, because there's two parts. One is you've talked about kind of the strategy going forward, but then there's a CIP that we're going to be hopefully approving on Monday. And so I don't know if you want, if the board wants to, which is much different, you know, as we all know, the CIP is the 10-year spending plan, and the county will kind of look at the whole plan, but will commit funding for 2026. So I don't know which would be easier. Fred, do you want to put the CIP up? Is that okay for the board to put the CIP up and focus on that and then come back to this, or start, or are there questions about the material that Fred just presented? And I have to say, I can't see arrow, hands up or anything, so just shout out.
Board Member Hauser, if I make a recommendation, I think if there are any specific questions to the CIP, I would prefer they be asked. The CIP is a living document, and it's going to be continue to be refined as we get more information on cost and feasibility of those projects that are listed. But I'll lead to you, Madam Chair, if you would like for us to post it.
Yeah, let's put up the CIP. There are questions, very specific questions about the CIP. I'll share with the board some of the things that we've discussed and the board has discussed to just bring it together. Oh, Sarah has a question.
Oh, no, I mean, Bonnie, you can finish what you were going to say, and then yeah, I have a
I was
question.
just going to say that you know, there's been some questions about projects that we've been doing and what's happening and making sure they show up in the CIP. I'll give you an example. The Orange High School restrooms, very interesting project. And I think most of us remember that, you know, the project really had three parts. One was the student restrooms, one was the faculty restrooms, and one was the field house. And the student restrooms, correct me if I'm wrong, the student restrooms were done, they're beautiful. I believe the faculty restaurants are done. I haven't seen those, but the field house restaurant rooms, Fred has told me, was not in the scope of the original work, but is in the scope, is something that you're planning to do this year. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is a part of those projects that we listed in the presentation that will be happening over this summer.
Right, same. So that's just an example of a project that somehow got lost in the transition and is back on the list. Another one, so and Fred, you spoke about the F1 Cheeks that we're through the second phase. I believe the project had 4 phases, and when I look at the CIP, and I look at the CIP, I don't see the later phases in the CIP. And are those funds elsewhere? It gets a little confusing because it's a project we approved and other funds someplace else.
So I can speak specifically to that. And so again, this is a living document. And so from my understanding of the history of the project, as we look at our overall portfolio and our capacity, there may not be a need to prioritize additional funding for capital improvements at F1 Cheeks given the decisions that the board makes on the next new school. For instance, if the scenario is that we build a new school and it's somewhere in close proximity to other schools, then it wouldn't be in good faith for us to spend money on a school that it doesn't have capacity needs at that time. Does that make sense?
Actually, it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. Although there's a F1 is controversial because we're doing interior improvements, and I don't know if those fall under Woolpert 1, 2, 3. But we did, and you just mentioned that we're through phase 2. It was 4 phases to essentially do every floor, every window, every door, everything in the entire school over the next 4 years. And we have, I could see in the budget that we even have the modular units leased out for a couple of years. And the only question, so when you mentioned earlier that we're through phase 2, which is wonderful. And so the question is, are we going to continue on with 3 and 4? Or have you put a hold on that? Or are you saying you put a hold on that till we see where we're going long term?
We're saying that right now we're not projected to spend money at Eflin Cheeks in that capacity, given the other projects in our building portfolio that take precedent and priority. However, if that is a need for the district at that time, we will continue to move monies as allocated to support each school and their unique needs. And so what I'm saying is that we are on track to finish phase 2. And as that is finishing and as the lease of the mobiles that had the students in those spaces while we were renovating the old spaces come available offline, we will see whether or not an addition to phase 3 and 4 will be needed at that time.
Okay, because is that okay with the board? I mean, I hear that. I'm hearing that we're because the county is going to look at this and they're going to approve fiscal 20, whatever we put on this chart for 2026. And that's what the board really needs to get.
Yeah.
So are people okay with that? Sarah, you want to?
Well, mine was a comment on something else in the CIP. So, I mean, I think, prioritizing among the very many projects makes sense to me. And so a lot of these feel like Woolpert level 1, 2, 3 types of projects, roof replacements and HVAC and security and things like that. So I don't have further thoughts, I think, on your question about Efland. My question was about the AL Standback HVAC replacement. So I was glad to see that on there because I feel like it had been further down sort of on the priority list, but I had been hearing from some staff members there for years about just like the extreme temperature extremes in some of the rooms. And so I was wondering if that HVAC project would solve that problem and address some of the like temperature variations in the building.
Yes and no.
Okay.
It is one piece of the puzzle. We will be needing to come in, like most of our schools, and look at some controls. Once we have the main piece of equipment, which is the air handler that blows out the air, then we will need to be able to control and temperature set. But it will provide a much needed thermal comfort to those in those spaces that weren't getting enough adequate airflow. So there'll still be more work to do if that answers your question.
Okay, and so that isn't on like the near term, the like controls and things are not on the near
It is not, but as we continue to comb through the needs of the district, what I have found helpful is to so the Whooper report was great. There are things that were not looked under the hood. And so when we talk about HVAC, I'm recommending that we might look at working with Johnson Controls or Snyder to do a more in-depth review of our systems. That will provide us a priority list that would include AL Standback, but other schools. So we know what components to put first our monies in to extend the life of our whole systems And so that hasn't been done yet, but a part of how I like to work is through a plan. And so we will be allocating monies to develop those plans so we can share that information so you can see how we're prioritizing HVAC needs as well as other system needs throughout the county.
Great, thank you.
Right, so, yeah, I mean, I see it as something that we're asking for for this year, right, which that makes sense to me. Any other questions from Carrie?
Mr. Davis and Bonnie, feel free to punt this question to another section if you want. I would like to hear, so I have two questions. One, I would like to hear a little bit more about holding off on the phase 3 and 4 of Eflin, just so I understand, but I feel like it's making sense with what Mr. Davis is saying about kind of reevaluating and once certain levels are complete, comparing it to other priorities. I also had a question as I was reviewing the minutes from November. We talked about how there was like a $29 million gap in like our capital planning. But then we talked about tonight, like in slide 7, there was a fiscal year 24 rollover of 26 million. And I'm just trying to remember how, where those rollovers come from, and do we often have a rollover? So the fact that we had a $29 million gap shared in November, is that something that we aren't wringing our hands about because these rollovers kind of happen as you're going through projects and reevaluating? Did that make sense?
It does, and I hope I
Okay.
can answer it the best way, but just let me know if I don't. So the first question about Eflin Cheeks, I have come to this district and have been able to assess how we have been planning and determining projects. And for the Eflin Cheeks phase 3 and 4, I would like to utilize those skill sets on determining whether or not we need to move forward on phase 3 and 4, giving the whole entire district portfolio. And that will come from further assessments as well as decisions that this board makes with the funding that is currently already allocated. And your second question is not abnormal or for districts' needs to be less than what districts are funded. And so that gap that you see, while it is unfortunate, I can tell you from my time in other counties, that gap is tremendously closer than what most districts see when it comes to capital improvement needs versus municipal funding. We will work with the county. And again, as we see with most economies now, our need has just ballooned. And there's no way, given the revenue sources, for us to be at a zero-sum game. We would love to have the need reflect the funding. But again, as we go through each year, working with the county on the funding, projects will be tethered and designed so that we can ensure we can get them done with the funding. So that means that projects may get pushed back, giving the total amount of money that we have in that year, as well as given the priority that this board has set.
So let me just clarify. First of all, and I want to go back on the Eflin stuff. And last year when we approved it, I remember having a conversation about exactly what you're doing, Fred, and that's should we be holding off in order to see what the long-term plan looks like. So I actually am, thank you for doing this. And the lease agreement also was giving us, the modular units is also giving us extra capacity in the building that we've needed. So that all makes sense. On the funding issue that Carrie's talking about, and Rhonda was going to give it to us, and I don't think she had the time to put it together, but the board is having some problem with transparency around capital. And we've learned the hard way that we had over $40 million in capital that wasn't visible to us, and we didn't know it wasn't being spent. And so we've started to spend that, but it's hard to tell from this. So Rhonda was going to give us a reconciliation of all, and some of it goes back to the 2015 bond, but Rhonda was going to give us a reconciliation of the whole thing. We won't have that tonight. We will get that to the board, or let's, Dr. Jones, can we get that to the board? Because it's very confusing. It's very confusing. Certainly, because we don't know as a board what it looks like. I have another question around it. I'll hold it, but that's where that comes from. It's not just, the cash doesn't just flow. We had money that we approved the project. It was put in a pot someplace and never spent, and we didn't have visibility to that we were sitting on all this money, and to the point where the county was threatening to take it away. And so said, if you guys don't need it, we'll take it back. So that's what we're concerned. So we don't have the full reconciliation of that. So I hear what you're saying on it. So it's not a need funding issue. It's an accounting issue and a capital funding reconciliation issue, right, Carrie? Am I getting that correct? That's what you're asking about?
Possibly, Bonnie. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about this whole rollover and just wondering if the rollovers are, due to delays or reassessment of needs, or, it makes sense that there's always going to be some rollover. But I was just wondering if there's more we should know about it, or if it's more ordinary, which may or may not relate to what you're talking about. Because you're more closely connected to that than I am.
It's hard to tell because both are happening. Just if I could add another wrinkle to it, well, I don't want to add another wrinkle to it. So, but I think we should see if we can get, I think I would be more comfortable. We had a real capital reconciliation, so we knew where all the money was, as opposed to the roll. And the money moves every year. Is that something that you want, or am I the only one that wants to see that?
See, whatever is feasible, whatever is feasible. I don't know. I'm gonna sit on that.
It's hard to tell because a lot of money moving, and it's just hard to tell. Are there other questions?
Bonnie, this is Will. I do have a couple of questions. So for the 10-year CIP, I didn't see Grady Brown having a cooling tower replacement. And I know in the past we've discussed that, and I'm curious, if y'all have reviewed that, Mr. Davis, or where do you see the Grady Brown cooling tower replacement potentially happening?
So that is not information that I've been given. Again, I'm customary to work on having an analysis of all our systems, and then being able to say Grady Brown's efficiency and operating at a level that means that it's time to be replaced. I think when you just have discussions about, oh, we should replace this, or we should replace that, gets off of its life cycle, and then it really makes it difficult to follow the money, as well as plan to have things allocated for those projects in a timely fashion. But to answer your question specifically for Grady Brown, I'm not certain that it won't be a cooling tower on this list. Again, these are projections for the next 10 years, but not that I'm wishing it to happen, but there's a major component that could happen on any of our schools that will bring it to the list. And next year, you'll be approving a capital improvement plan that may have other projects added to the list, and moving things out if we can. based on where we are. And so the cooling tower will probably take precedent over adding controls to a school. And so that will be the information that we'll provide to help you see while, you know, last year or this in 2 years, we're supposed to use controls at Central Elementary. But the cooling tower at Grady Brown has become a more pressing need. And so unfortunately, the controls at Central Elementary will be moved to the next fiscal year while taking care of the higher priority of a cooling tower, which makes sure your system is running properly at that site.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, that cooling tower is pretty old. Like, I
Yeah,
think,
and again, you would love to be able to say at year 20 or however
right,
it is you can replace it. But again, kudos, as I mentioned before, to our maintenance department for being able to keep things running beyond its life cycle. I mean, many of our schools are beyond its life cycle. And so while we do take that in consideration, we just want to make sure, because we don't have that much money, that we're spending it, that will help us stretch the systems and these school facilities more.
okay.
Just to confirm, Mr. Davis, the cooling tower, would that be part of the evaluation or assessment of all of our HVAC units?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for the clarity. And I had a similar question about pathways in the cooling tower. I know, I think a year and a half ago, it was mentioned that that cooling tower was undersized for the space that it's covering, especially in the cafeteria gym that's shared between where they do PE, where they eat, and I know it struggles to keep up. But I guess to Dr. Jones' point earlier, that would be part of that evaluation. The last comment I had was in the timing that you showed for the bond money and the feedback. I definitely want to, you know, request that the board ensures we have a public hearing beyond the individual data gathering, right? Where we have the smaller groups getting the feedback, but really having a board public hearing to give the opportunity for people to come in and share thoughts directly on, you know, what the proposals are or concerns, thoughts, you know, and just making sure we, you know, advertise that and have a good idea of when that will be. I know we've got kind of a 3-month span there to have those discussions, but I definitely want to make sure we have a board level public hearing as well. And just closing out with the thought, thank you so much for all the hard work on this. Really appreciate all the work you're doing digging into this and really, you know, trying to get us you know, that 10-year plan and the bond plan. Thank you.
And thanks, Will. Did I see Wendy? Did you have a question?
I did, but it was answered. I was curious as to why we had a lease for Eflin, but you answered by saying that it was for the bungalows, which I was not aware. And but thank you. But I also want to comment, I understand that Bonnie, that you may want the accountability to reconcile any capital that was rolled over, and that was one of my other questions, where is this money coming from? But once he talked about it, it's very difficult to ask for, why do we have this extra money when all the schools have different needs? And if we're not getting the funding in time and we're not meeting those needs, then we roll over the money. So it seems like, unless I'm not really understanding, that we are readjusting ourselves with this whole new team and with this WUPO report that I don't know where I can get it, and I want to have access to it so I can really do my homework. But it's difficult to request, in my opinion, unless I'm wrong, for information if all schools have different needs. So, but thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, thank you for that. I think the only question is, we've been allotted a bunch of money already. How much have we spent? How much is going forward? And it's unclear sometimes if projects that we've approved that are in the second or third year, if those are on here, or if that, just a little confusing. And just in the spirit of no surprises, it was, we just want to know if there's money that's not being spent. We don't have the problem now that we were having, and that's that no projects were being done. The funds were being allotted and nothing was being done. So we just want to get kind of caught up to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all. And I think once we're moving, it should move pretty quickly. Any other questions, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I think the idea that nothing was being done is a mischaracterization. So I think that, to your point about wanting to be clear about what has happened, what happened with the last bond, all of that, I think that would be helpful. One thing that I think has been helpful as the team thinks about how best to track and report this stuff is the document that we have reviewed, I think at a previous one of these committee meetings, a couple of times. That's like, here are all of the current projects underway. It might have the funding source on there. Like, here's the status or phase that each one is in. Like, that I think was an improvement in terms of being able to consistently have the same list of these are the ones that are on our current agenda and where they are in their process. So I think there's probably some parallel to that in terms of spending down of funds or something that we could do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We've talked about that the last meeting. I think once we get the capital improvement plan, we could really start talking about getting some reports out that will help us monitor it. So I have that as a next step item. I have a couple of, and again, the focus for the capital plan is this year, but I just have a couple of other questions. I was fascinated to see the pod renovations for Grady Brown. I thought that was great to see. Last time it was like 16 million. This time it's 6. And I was curious if that's just a placeholder that you're thinking about, or if that's something you're really serious of looking at hard at prioritizing in the next few years. And I'll ask them all. That's one. Second is, well, I'll ask them one at a time. Let's take that one.
If I heard your question correctly, based on the project specific, we have allocated 6 million over the course of 3 years for pod renovation. Again, that's an estimate and it's a forecast. As we get closer, and as projects come off the list, we'll have to go through a project ordinance to ensure what needs to happen and those renovations match the funding dollars that have been set aside.
Got it. So that's but you're looking at closing the walls up or closing the pods up. Is that what that is?
That is correct, among other things that will make the school more efficient. So, but we haven't determined what that project ordinance will be. So, yeah.
It's years away. I also noticed that Orange Middle went from 70 million to 45 million. So I was wondering if there's if you've got some ideas behind that you want to share today. I mean, it's a couple of years away. I was just interested.
It's really based on what we forecast from the initial project that the board determines, and so if the board presents a project that is on a new greenfield site that is a K-5 that matches a capacity given the information, that puts us at a budget of much more than what was originally stated in the Whipple report, we believe that around 45 million may be left once that time comes for those types of renovations. But the beauty of the cash flow and additional funding sources is that we can supplement funding for bond projects on capital improvements with other sources that we have before us. And so I would not look or lean heavily on the dollar amounts. Again, this is just a way to communicate to the county of how much spending we think we will be spending each fiscal year.
Got it. Got it. All right. So, and then you have the painting hallways, classrooms at Orange High School. And I'm imagining the county commissioners going, oh, that's priority 4 and 5. So we're gonna have a problem with that. And that's not for 5 years out, but I just don't know if they're gonna look at that and say, well, you guys aren't paying attention. You know, so is that something they're gonna have trouble with?
So we've shared this document and we have a meeting with the county on Friday. And we have placed this information in their document that talks about the high priority needs. And so we'll look to have further discussion on Friday. But I think we are engaging and aligning on how we see capital planning and the adjacent funding that they project to receive.
Okay, and then one final question, and I think there's some others that from me. Do you want to put a project in, like, do we need to put any project planning, consulting, or for the capital projects, and do we need to put funding in for that? And you'll know that the county's still deciding what to do about project management, which is a separate $1 million a year that they're going to budget for this. But I just didn't know if we needed to set aside money to support you in your planning for these bond projects.
Yes, so in regards to the bond projects, the county is discussing providing us additional funding for bond project management. I have, based on my knowledge, set aside roughly 10% of all of these projects for design and project management. And so you don't see it here, but in our funding sources, we've worked with Ms. Raff to identify a bucket of money for design and project management consulting services to ensure we're being efficient in the dollars that we have.
Yes, and I guess what I was asking is, before we get into the specific projects, do you need money now? And I don't know if that's 100,000, I don't know what that is, but do you need money over the next 6 to 12 months to actually do these assessments and the planning and the projects?
No, we're using some of the deferred rollover money that we talked about for planning and design of these projects that are happening within the 6 to 12 months. So the data collection and the feasibility, we've utilized deferred capital funding to help us provide the information so we know what the first project of 2024 bond will be.
So is this going to be the submission to the county? These 2 pages is going to be fundamentally our capital plan. These are good questions. Is there any, I'm sorry, before Anne had a question.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Davis for doing this comprehensive plan. And I think that it's good for us to see that. I do think that the more we see about how the projects are progressing, the fewer questions we have, and the more we can answer other people's questions if they do have some. But one thing I want to throw out, and this is the principle in me coming out, that a lot of these projects are done while children are in the building. And that slows things down to a certain degree because you are working around schedules and a lot of things with children in the building. So I understand that you can't go in and get something finished in X amount of days if you're working with children in a building. And I think people sometimes need to just remember that we do have children in the building for a lot of these projects and things that are going on. But I do appreciate all the work that you and your team have put into this. And I think this is, in my eyes, it's ready to go to the county and see what they say on Friday. If you have a meeting with them on Friday, I'd say take it on and see what they say. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just to confirm that, so these 2 pages is essentially gonna go forward as our capital improvement plan.
That is correct.
That's great. Any other questions? So it will go on our agenda for Monday. And I don't know if you want to put it on, do we want to put it on agenda for discussion? Do we want to put it on consent? And then let people pull it if there are questions? Do we care?
I think our plan is to place it on consent. If there are questions, leading up to that, it can be pulled and we'll be happy to discuss.
Okay.
And, if there are any changes based on Mr. Davis's meeting with the county on Friday, we'll be sure to communicate that to you as well.
Great. Anything else? So, I have, and this is actually a carryover from our last meeting. And now that, I mean, it's exciting to have our CIP, and we haven't had one for 2 years. So thank you for getting this together. It's really exciting and really thoughtful, by the way. So it's really nice to see that. So the CIP is done. There was something that the board has mentioned last time, and it came up again today, and that's some kind of progress on projects. And maybe, I don't know if that's something that you're thinking about in the next few months, to give us a proposal on what you would like to report on a periodic basis. And we even talked, last time we talked about putting it on the website so that people would know what's going on with projects. You know,
We're working on creating that list. Thank you for your patience. Our goal is the projects that you saw on that list that will be starting this spring and summer, tracking those projects. The projects that happened prior to my arrival, they are pretty much complete. Those being the tennis courts and tracks. There are some small touch-ups that they will have to do, but from what I've been given, all the projects that were slated to be completed by the time they were completed in fiscal year 2025 will be completed. Going forward, we'll have a clear document of projects on the CIP and what their status is, and we can provide that to Dr. Jones on a monthly basis to see changes in the status.
do we want to, what is the board, I mean, how do people feel about that? Do you want to see it? I'm personally not interested in seeing it monthly. I think that's too much for us, but I don't know if others are. You know, quarterly would be amazing. Once a year would be better than we've ever had. You
Okay.
know? So would that be okay with people? Once a year we updated the status of these projects, or do you want it more frequently? Any comments?
I agree, Bonnie, the monthly's too much, and because it's not going to change that significantly month over month, and I definitely don't want staff spending a lot of time to try to update the lower levels. So having quarterly at the earliest, to me, like you said, maybe just yearly, because these are long projects. These are not things that finish in a couple of days or a week. So I'm open to a timing, but I would like to, get some updates so we can share with, our communities as well.
Carrie, thanks, little Carrie.
Say if for some reason it's easier for staff to just like have some process they do every month and then they share it out with us monthly or quarterly, but we don't, dissect it. We just are receiving whatever their update is. That would be fine with me. But I agree that definitely doesn't need to be like a monthly presentation or anything like that.
Wendy, did you have Wendy?
Yes. Oops. Thank you again for everything. And I think that an update will be great as needed. So they're the ones that know when there's change on whatever project. And they can say, by the way, we're updating you on X, Y, and Z because this is what's happening currently. I think, in my opinion, that would be better. Any program that is going to be required that they're updating for whatever reason, then they know to update us. That is just my opinion, but whatever works for everybody, because all projects are out in different phases, and that's what I got.
Sarah?
Yeah, I like the idea of doing the big annual update on projects, which I think we have traditionally done, often with pictures, some sort of presentation actually like that. I think it would be great to know, when one of the major projects is completed, right? So like when the Orange High School bathrooms were open and we like saw a little bit of that, like that can be like in the weekly updates that Dr. Jones sends. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't need to be a big thing, but it's nice to know when they're done, actually. And then maybe we could also consider having like a midpoint moment where, when projects end up being delayed or more expensive than we thought, there are changes. And so it does seem like we'd want to know at some point in the year about the changes rather than like hearing about that at the end of the year. So I don't know if that's just like project by project letting us know through Dr. Jones, or if there's opportunity to like have a more formal moment. I'm up for either of those, but having some way to know when things have changed, significant things have changed would be helpful.
Yeah, I think all of that sounds great. The thing to remember, I'm just very thankful for the work that Mr. Davis has come in and done. It's been less than 6 months. And so I remember my first 6 months coming in into the district, and I don't know what was, it's just a lot of information to take in, and, having to reassess and to establish some protocols that make sense for all of us. And so as he's working through that, if there are any updates that you have, you're getting some questions about, or you just want to know as an individual board member, as a full board, please just reach out to either to me and we'll get that out to you, but we'll come up with a system to provide some regular updates. I know that that's important for people to be able to have access to.
Yeah, and just for the record, I mean, in the short, that sounds fine. That sounds good. And in the short 6 months, in my time with the board, if you look at past CIPs, this is the most thoughtful that I've seen since I've been on the board. So I just wanted to say double thanks on that. And I know it's a lot, and plus adding the big bonds in there. We're in uncharted waters for the district for a long time to have this much money and have all these projects. And Sarah, I appreciated your correction before. We had, for my first couple of years on the board, we had a lot of turnover. We had several people in the operations leadership role, and then when Mr. Abley took it over, he started to combine projects, so we weren't approving little projects all the time. He combined them and started to move them, but that was just about 2 years ago, but that's when the backlog came. But we're really moving. I do have one other thought on how this approval goes, and maybe it's something to think about right now. I've been seeing on our consent agenda, amendments where there's a $2,000 increase on a large project, $2,000 add-on, and it just seems like a lot of administration for a small amount of money. And so I'd be curious about planning as projects get approved to have built-in contingencies so you don't have to go crazy over very small overruns for the board. If the funds are running out, if you're changing, right, that's a whole different thing. But it would be nice to make it easier for your staff to administer the change orders.
Yeah, Bonnie, in policy, I believe the superintendent can do up to 50K without talking to us. So maybe there's, I don't know, Dr. Jones, if you're just wanting us to be aware, or, it's definitely within our policy that they have that flexibility.
Yeah,
in a
we just do that.
chamber.
Yeah, we do that to be as transparent as possible to make you aware of what's going on when we have projects that are overrun.
Yeah, so we have a built-in contingency in the project to begin with that becomes easier. So it's just something to consider. Um, yeah, anything else before we wrap this? So the takeaways are the project status list, the annual update. We have a plan that's going forward on consent. And then, Fred, as you move forward, let's go back for a second to the bigger conversation about strategy. Is there a time where you will be able to give us an idea of points when you will engage the board with specific decisions or specific data that you're collecting, like enrollment or program information or the assessments of the facility? So like in March, will there be decisions that you'll be asking us to make through this process, or should we just wait and see? So I don't know if you have a specific timeline or plan to bring certain things to us over the next 6 months.
Yeah, so we anticipate tonight is the first of many conversations. Of course, the board meeting on the 27th will bring forth the approval of the CIP. On the 24th, we will have another opportunity to provide data and a bond update. And in between the 24th and the board meeting in March, we will look to have opportunities for stakeholder engagement among the board and the community as well as administration. The short answer is there will be some in-between meetings from meetings that are already put on our calendar, such as board meetings for engagement and sharing of information.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like there's a bunch of hot topics that will come up, especially if you decide to move forward on the Hillsborough Elementary campus and year round and all that. So we'll hear it so there'll be time before then. And then the other thing is, and Dr. Jones, if it's, we talked about this, if Rhonda can give us, it's really a starting point. I think once we are moving, it'll be good, but I think it'll be nice to have a starting point reconciliation on capital. So for example, Fred was saying, well, we've had this deferred maintenance money that's covering our project costs. So so it's just helpful to understand where we are with it. And then once we have a starting point and we're moving, I think we won't need to see it anymore.
Yeah, I think she's prepared to do that per our planning meeting.
Okay, great. All right, so I think this was great. I mean, thank you again so much for getting this done for us. Any other questions on the capital plan? We'll move to budget. Okay, let's do it. Dr. Jones?
So, yeah, while we're transitioning our slides, as I mentioned before, Ms. Rath is not able to be with us this evening, and so I'm going to walk us through the beginning of our budget. These are our initial conversations, and Mr. Coweek is going to jump in. He and Ms. Rath have been working together as they should in discussion on items that we're considering as far as like expansion when it comes to staffing. So I will let Franklin drive us. And if you go to the next slide, Franklin, what I wanted to do, and really what Ms. Rath and I wanted to do, because we worked on this a little bit together, is to take a look at a quick review of what we did last year. And if you go to the next slide, Franklin, you can see that on April the 8th of last year, the board approved a budget request totaling $47.8 million, which was submitted to the Orange County Board of Commissioners for funding consideration. This request incorporated the salary and benefit increase approved in the state's biennium budget, as well as expansion initiatives that we continue to advocate for to support our school communities. Last year, 1.9 million was needed to continue operating Orange County schools at the same level as the previous academic year. An additional 3.1 million was requested to implement a step increase in the current classified employee pay scales to equate to a 0.5% increase for each year of service completed. An increase to the current certified supplement tiers to be more competitive with our bordering districts when it comes to local supplements. Funds to continue funding NC EdCore tutoring program, additional funding to expand STEM throughout our district. And the request was also to provide funds to ensure that all students have equitable access to field trips. So in total, Orange County Schools asked the commissioners for 47.8 million for the 24-25 school year, which equated to a $5 million increase over the previous year. Again, this is just a review of where we were last year. If you go to the next slide, Franklin. So at the June 18th meeting with the Board of County Commissioners, they approved funding for both Orange County and Chapel Hill City Schools at $5,666 per pupil. So for us in Orange County schools, it equated to 44.9 million in funding based on our student enrollment. This approved budget supported funding for Orange County schools to continue operations at the same level as the previous year and implement the legislated salary and benefit increases, which was projected to cost 44.7 million. Unfortunately, this approved budget did not support funding the expansion initiatives that we mentioned on the previous slide. Next slide, Franklin. So because we anticipated not being funded for some of our expansion items and due to the loss of the ESSER funding, last year we thoughtfully looked at every budget line item to reallocate or cut existing budgets in the amount of about $700,000. In doing this, we were able to fund what you see on this slide. So again, unfortunately, we were not able to fund any increases to our classified salary scales or an increase to our teacher local supplement, but we were able to fund items that fit into our budget priorities of recruiting and retaining high quality workforce, improving student proficiency and academic growth, and making sure we're allocating resources to meet the needs of our students and staff. Next slide, please. So now we're going to discuss our fiscal year 26 budget. If you go to the next slide, Franklin, here you'll see a list of key dates for adopting our upcoming 25-26 local operating budget. I'm not going to read through those, but they're pretty similar from year to year, but we always want to give you this timeline. Where you don't see exact dates is because we're dependent on others to set some meeting times. So, and sometimes those vary depending on input that we make it. Next slide, Franklin. So each year we present the county with our continuation budget. The continuation budget reflects the financial resources needed for Orange County schools to continue existing programs, staffing levels, and services at our current level. The continuation budget also includes estimated costs due to inflation. We have prepared 3 scenarios that include a consistent consumer price index or CPI of 3%. Just as a reminder, the CPI measures inflation. Salaries are projected at 2%, 3%, and 4%. Where we land will depend on the state's budget. Most districts around us are around that 3% range when doing their projections. And I think in our conversations with the county, we're all looking at the 3%. So it will probably be closer to the 3% range. Next slide, please. So in preparing for this fiscal year, we were anticipating and planning for a tight budget. Again, all while still being committed to what remains to be our budget priorities: recruiting and retaining a high quality workforce, ensuring student academic proficiency and growth, and allocating resources to meet the needs of our students and staff. Next slide. Again, because like I said, we anticipated that tighter budget. We still are looking at expanding our expansion requests to include an increase in our teacher local supplement and an increase in our classified local supplement scales. So if you go to the next slide, Franklin, I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Mr. Coweek, and he'll discuss our requests for these increases in local classified and certified supplements in a little bit more detail.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Franklin. So the first, what we just wanted to show you is what our current supplements are for our certified personnel based on their years of service. You know, you can see that the supplement ranges from 12% to 18% in the supplement column. And we also have a breakdown of the approximate number of staff in each of those categories. This is, of course, certified staff only. And then the percentage of our teachers, our certified instructional staff in those particular ranges, ranging from 17% for our instructional certified staff from 14 to 19 years, all the way up to 30% for 20 years. I mean, obviously we can see from that the percentages are pretty even across those four bands, except for the 14 to 19 and the 20. There's, you know, up and down there. Thank you, Franklin. What our team did, and I just want to always shout out folks who did the work for this. This information was created by Amanda Parsley in the HR department, working with Rhonda as well. But as you can see from this slide, this is a comparison of this current school year local supplements for Orange County versus other neighboring counties. Right, and you can see that the orange line is, of course, the Orange County schools. And, you know, when you look at this graph overall, you, of course, can draw your own conclusions. But what you can see is that, you know, there seems to be a nestling at the bottom of the range with Orange and ABSS and Person County for new staff from 0 to 5 years in the 12, 12, and 10%, while Wake, Durham, and Chapel Hill are up on the 17, 18%. Orange County still remains fairly significantly behind in supplement to Chapel Hill, Wake, and Durham for our teachers in the 6 to 13 year range. For whatever reason that happens in the 14 to 19 year range, we are definitely seem to have separated a little bit from the Alamance and Person County range and closer to DPS, Wake, and Chapel Hill. And then we seem to be in our own middle category for our 20 plus years when we're comparing the supplements across the board. All right, next slide, please. So one of the things that we took a look at is how much would it cost if we were able to provide this supplement, you know, increasing the supplement. In the first column, you can see our current OCS supplement. There's the dollar, what the supplement totals are, and underneath it, it's a repeat of what our current supplement value is, 12%, 14, 16, and 18. In the second column, this is some data about if we had a tiered increase in our supplement. For example, if we increase the 0 to 5 year category by 1% to go from 12 to 13, if we did a tiered increase in the 6 to 13 year category, again, moving it up 1%, and then if we moved up 2% for our 14 to 19 years teachers and 3 years, there you can see what that extra cost would be. That's the difference in total line in the second row, if we followed that increase. And then the last column is what if we could give 3% across the board to every instructional certified staff? What is the additional cost that would result? As you can see, that takes us to just about $740,000 more would be needed for that. There is, and you can see that if we add that 3%, all of a sudden now we become a lot more competitive with our neighboring districts, particularly in the mid-range from the 6 to the 19 years of age of experience. We pull extremely close. You know, one of the things we always like to talk about, OCS, we're small, we're mighty, you know, we can get things done as a small district. We've got, but we certainly, one of the things we always hope to avoid is, you know, we don't want people to choose other districts because they're making an extra $1,000, $2,000 when they're coming toward us, or at other levels even more. So that's why, you know, as I see, you know, I'm certainly encouraged to see that it was on the expansion budget for last year before I ever got here, and we wanted to run some numbers to see what we could do. Now, granted, we ran this back in the fall before we got the more recent news about what we might expect from the expansion budget. But, you know, is this, you know, the old adage about the squeaky wheel, if you don't ask for things, you don't put it out there, then you're certainly not going to get it, right? So, all right. Thanks, Franklin. Next slide. So we're also talking, you know, we were also talking, Rhonda and I and Dr. Jones, about we'd also like to try to do something to support our classified employees, particularly our classified employees at the lower pay grades. We're not talking about classified employees who are coordinators and above. And so thinking, what could it take to do something for our lowest paid employees as well? Next slide, please. So currently, our classified employees, there's 3 different ranges for supplements. Okay, the chart I think speaks for itself. The classified employees, that's for our folks who are on our classified pay grades, right? These are all of our TAs, our bookkeepers, our bus drivers, our maintenance workers, right? These are the folks that are making up our classified employee with the 7% supplement, and it's the greatest number of them in the district when we're talking about classified employees. So one of the things that we have been talking about is, what could it take to get to, if we could raise all of our classified employees from 7% supplement to 9% supplement. I know that's something that Rhonda and I were talking about, I think over the last week, between the weather, Rhonda not being able to be here. Rhonda had started to put together some information, which is on the next slide, please, Franklin. So what would it take, for example, if we were to have a 1% local supplement increase for our roughly 280 employees? It would take about another $150,000. If we were able to think about making that to 9%, then it would be, you know, at least double that, 300,000. So pie in the sky, what we'd love to be, I'm sure we all would love to do at a minimum, would be to say, yes, we get all of our, you know, instructional certified staff 3%, get our lowest paid classified employees, right, to, you know, to a supplement that makes them the same as coordinators. The flat rate for that would be the $740,000 for the certified, plus the roughly $300,000 if that 1% you see on there was 2%. That would be $1 million, over $1 million. But then you have to factor in some, you know, some other benefits and other retirement costs on top of that. But that's the scope we're looking at. As you can see, Rhonda was also putting together some numbers of, hey, what if we did sort of a modified, or again, sort of a graduated 1% local supplement increase for folks who had 15 years of service, increase them 1%. You could see that the total bill for that would be $65,000 roughly. That would impact almost half of our classified employees with that increase. So these are numbers that we're throwing, that we wanted to present to you to show the work that we've been doing to think about how we can, support our employees. And I think that's the last slide. Frank? Yep. So any questions that you might have, I'll be happy to answer as Rhonda Rath as best as I can.
Yeah, and we'll take any questions, and then there'll also be some room if you wanted to share some other priorities for us to discuss. We'll take those as well.
This is really informative. I thank you so much. Very different than we've seen in the past. Sarah?
Yeah, this is very, very helpful. I have a question about some of the early information, the projections, and then something on this. So I saw some headlines in the news about projections for state employees, their benefits costs and things going up. So are we projecting for that? Was it like 24% increase in retirement and something in the hospitalization? So that we've incorporated whatever we know about that already.
And that's estimated.
Yeah.
Because we don't know that, and that's what's hard about the timing of the state's budget coming out. So we have to estimate those. And so once we learn that, then we kind of revamp and see where everything falls. But yes, those are estimated numbers.
Okay.
And we are taking into account in our discussions how else that impacts with,
Mhm.
we can't just do this without knowing what the state is giving, as a raise too, because that impacts, the ability to, because if the state gives, let's say the state gives a 5% raise, we have to account for that local supplement increase as well. So there, so Rhonda is on top of all of that when factoring this in.
Yeah.
So Sarah, if I could just jump, just to clarify, you were projecting a $2 million increase, and that assumed a 3% state increase. Is that did I understand that correctly? And that would be just technically continuation budget.
Yes, I think it was like 1.9 million. That would be if the state gives a raise of 3%. That would be what we need from the county to continue at our current levels.
Yeah. So just to continue from there, I am a little concerned that about whether we will even be able to get that much. So we may be in a position of needing to, I mean, hopefully we do, because it's the bare minimum, mandated by the state. But it does make me, concerned that it might not be the year to be able to accomplish the things that we want to on the supplements. I think this is really good thinking on those. I wanted to just offer a couple of additional thoughts on it, if now's a good time. So first, like we're way off with beginning teachers, and I think like we have a lot of people in those very advanced years, and people are retired. Like we, as a district, I don't know what it's like in other districts, but this district has a lot of teachers retired from here, and so we need to be making sure that we're competitive at that other end as well as that category of teachers where it seems like we're behind. We just have fewer of them. And I think it's probably because around that time they go to another district. So looking at what we're doing there. And I would like to encourage us to look at the way that Wake and Durham are actually doing their salary schedules and think about doing that. So if you go on their websites, they have their salary schedules, and they don't say it's an X% increase for these number of years of experience. What they do is like okay, let me try to explain this. The percent you saw in all those years for Durham and Wake is actually quite similar. It's like maybe around 18% or something like that. But because your salary goes up from the state every year, the dollar that's worth goes up too. Like that 18% of $43,000 is less than 18% of $54,000, so you can sort of see that increase more clearly. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I think both of those districts are doing is that those years where the state has like flattened and you get no increases, years like 15 through 24, they're giving increases in their supplement. So the way they do it is by laying out year by year what the increase is going to be. They've built in year 15, year 16, year 17, you get a little bit of an increase. And here it's just flat. And so if there is a way for us to figure out what it would cost to be able to mimic that sort of thing in those years 15 through 24 or whatever, I think that would be valuable. And I also think just the way they lay out their salaries with if you're in your 5th year, this is the size of your supplement in dollars is just kind of more transparent. It's like easier to process if you're like looking around at different districts too. So just generally like that approach of theirs because I think like they've made a trade-off in like that percent not increasing as quickly across those years, but then addressing separately the fact of the state flattening across 15 through 24.
Other thoughts and comments? I agree completely, Sarah. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but thank you for raising that. Anything else?
Yep. Yeah, Bonnie, this is Will. I agree, with what Sarah was getting at. The other thing too, I think we have to, I'm just gonna maybe remind or just say it out loud. One of the changes that we made was teacher experience. Because a lot of districts we found out, including Orange County at the time, no matter how many years you had been a teacher in North Carolina or somewhere else, we started you at 0, but then we changed the policy of we're going to give you credit which allowed us to bring people in and get the higher supplements, which actually really helped us get more skilled teachers. And I agree, we need to be more competitive with our supplements to attract and retain. And I definitely like seeing the data for us to be, comparable. And to Sarah's point about seeing the different years, we had to do that with our classified, right? They used to only have a scale that said, years 1, and then you didn't get anything until like year 15, and we changed that to be year by year to ensure there would be some supplement. So I think that's a good idea to look at as well.
Others? Good point. Yeah. I'll just add, when we did Hill, we, like you're saying, well, we decompressed the step schedules, and the only group I think that didn't get decompressed were the 15 to 25s, or 15 to 24s, excuse me, right? And they're the ones that are on this flat salary schedule, plus the increases, so that they're just not getting increases from the state. And Sarah, did I understand correctly that you're concerned about us losing the experienced staff, right?
I'm concerned on both ends. I think we're probably missing plenty of like folks going into teaching or a couple of years of experience because we're so far behind the other districts. Like if you're like a young person who's not making much money in the first place, why are you going to go somewhere making so much less, But seeing that we have so few people in that, I think it's 15 to 19 age range, you showed the breakdown of how many we have in each of those categories. It makes me think, are we losing folks there as well? And then seeing that some of those other districts were giving them increases in those years kind of made me question what was going on there.
So I'm very much in favor of seeing if we can decompress that range, that 15 to 24 range. Any other comments?
Wendy, I just want to say thank you for putting and really thinking about the teachers, and I'm in line with Sarah and what Will said, and but we need to pay them more, and I hope we can, despite the fact that we are having a lot of cuts everywhere. Thank you.
Other comments?
Just that I appreciate the presentation and Rhonda and Mr. Cowick and Dr. Jones looking ahead at what possibilities we might have.
Yeah, and one thing, that we have discussed as well is if we don't get this request this year, we want to be prepared, right? We want to know what it's going to cost us. We'll have these on hand and be able to generate numbers more quickly, depending on how many folks are in the categories. And when we start talking about decompressing certain scales or offering different ranges, we want to make sure we're careful in our analysis of that so that it falls within our budget and we don't run into issues of over promising and under delivering. And so I think I like, like a slower approach, but I definitely agree with all of the comments, and we'll take all of those back and see where we can provide a little bit more detail. But again, we are going to advocate, especially for our classified and our teachers that need that additional funding inflation is going up and their raises are very minimal. So we're going to continue to advocate for them. So if there are other expansion items that you wanted to share at this time, we're happy to take those as well.
Dr. Jones, I just have to say, when in this particular presentation, this presentation, last time we said $2 million for raises, these were much more precise and much more precise areas for increase. And I just don't know if that is going to be harder, is that's going to hit harder when it's presented. So
yeah, because what we're asking for are those that are instructional staff. So we're we're asking for those that are student facing, our teachers and our coaches that are and interventionists that are working with staff. And so I think that helps to not have such a broad area that we're looking at, or just all certified positions, but we thought that just being a little bit more intentional there. And, you know, we can certainly break down all areas within our district, but certainly want to pay attention to those that are student facing, and when we're in a crisis, trying to get teachers to come and commit and stay. And if we can get them here, we know how to support them, we know how to treat them well and to treat them respectfully. But paying them will, especially our young teachers, will get them to stay with us.
I just wonder, in the budget presentation, should we hit harder? And on the point that our EC and our MLL populations are, I believe they're both growing, but we've way exceeded the caps, the funding caps. So and it's just an awareness to the county commissioners that our student needs are growing, and the funding that's available to us is just not, is not meeting the needs. So I just don't know if that helps to make our case about, and your team is making it work, but it's a hardship for us. And so just a question. Does anyone think?
Yeah, I'll take that back to Ms. Rath and to the team, and we can make that kind of drive that point home. Again, this isn't our presentation for the county commissioners. This is what we're bringing to you just to share some of our initial thoughts and get some of your feedback on, so that we can make adjustments. But yeah, that is a good point.
Other thoughts on priorities or things that people want to see in the budget? There've been questions about allotments and some others. It really depressed us. I wonder about, oh God, I lost my thought. I'm wondering about, in some cases I've seen, do we have team balances or allotments that we need to increase? We need to bring more teachers into more spaces, and I'm thinking about places where we have teams of 3 versus 4 in a middle school. I just curious if there are allotments or resource allocations that we really would like to beef up. Also, English language learners, I'm sorry, ESL teachers, for our growing ELL, the sheltered classrooms, anything that we're doing strategically that we really need more staff to do it the way we want to.
So part of our work this year is making sure that we take the time to analyze how we are staffing in every department and in every school. Okay, and so we're going to get into allotments a little bit later this year with you all. I think that's something we plan to do maybe in February. Mr. Kowick shaking his head in February, and kind of break those down for you. But the starting point has to be the state allotment. Otherwise, we find ourselves to be over allotted and not really knowing why we're doing what we're doing. Like if we decide to, like you mentioned, add another team at a middle school. Well, and I'm going to confess, I was a middle school principal, so was Miss Purcell. If I could make a case for any given day why I need that. And so what we have to rely on is our data, the supports that we currently have in place. And yes, we want our principals to advocate for what they need, and just see how effective the supports that we have are. And so we're looking heavily at our data right now. We're having conversations with principals. But we have to be careful because once we allocate resources, especially personnel, that is year over year funding. And we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we over allot to a point where we have to drastically remove positions in a building. So right now where we're at is we're in a position of analyzing where we are. We're meeting with different departments, and we're going to review those allotments with you all, the process that we take to look at that. And we're going to review that with principals. And we do that we've done that. We did it last year, and we're going to go into that again soon in the spring.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Gary?
I just want to emphasize, I appreciate the tough look you've taken at every department. I know you will lift up those efforts, maybe even share in a little more detail. I feel like we've gotten a little more detail from time to time, but that was a pretty careful raking that each department did, and $700,000 is not nothing. And I think our district has done really careful work as well as with the allotments and to avoid later cuts. And I know we can't control the fact that we don't have a special district tax that our sister district has, but the difference in supplements, it is frustrating when I know how carefully and I'm proud of the work that your team has done, Dr. Jones. So I hope you just take the moments to lift up those efforts when you present to the county.
Yeah, absolutely, because that was tough. But we had to find it. Otherwise we would have had issues where we were having to look at personnel or whether or not we're going to carry over specific resources that our students and our teachers are relying on. And so to that, we are still continuing those efforts. We are looking very closely at the resources that we utilize to see if they're being effective, the services that we are contracting to see if there are ways for us to eliminate some of those. And we're making some slow and steady progress with that. But that is something that every department is going to continue to do until we get to the point where we understand where every single dollar is going and that we know that it is being allocated in a manner that impacts students first. Right, and helps to support our teachers in what they have to do from day to day. So that it's a process, but we're continuing to engage in some of that work in every single department.
Other questions, comments, thoughts on priority? Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, just one more that occurred to me in the supplements and compensation realm is sometimes we've talked about considering a differentiated supplement for EC teachers and TAs. And it may cost less to do that, and it may be really impactful for retention in those roles. So I'm definitely open to looking at that as well.
Yep, and we're happy to look at that if that's something that the board wants us to look at. We try to be careful to not distinguish between teachers in that way because it becomes a little bit hard to justify why we give an EC teacher a supplement versus and not give an ESL teacher a supplement. And then all of our teachers work really hard. So I don't want to kind of weigh one set of teachers against another and decide where we put our value. There are other ways that we can look at some of that, but we'll definitely bring that to you if that's something that you would like to request. But typically, we try not to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I understand not wanting to create divides between staff for sure. If we look at it, it would be helpful to understand what's the turnover rate in those different types of roles, regular TA, ECTA, regular classroom teacher, EC classroom teacher, because I suspect just from board reports that the turnover rates are quite different. And Chapel Hill, I believe still, they were doing anyway a differentiated supplement for EC as well. So it is potentially a competitive thing as well, but not pushing hard for it. Just think we should look at that given potential turnover rates there.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I'm just, if I may, just to respond to Ms. Smiley's comments as well. Our classified staff team, Phyllis, Connie, and I, we've looked at the classified pay grades. We've taken the time to look, are our pay grades the way we feel like they should be based on the work that they do? Right now, we've got 4 different classes of TAs in one category, in one pay grade. We would love to be able to make, and this is true in other districts, right, where ECTAs are at a higher grade than a regular TA. But when we sort of put an eye to that, this is not like just money growing on trees, right? So when we're looking at that, we're like, well, does this position really warrant this, right? So there might be ups and downs, in terms of wanting to calibrate it. So we are looking at sort of everything, as Dr. Jones said, to see what we can do, what can be budget neutral, right? So we can, hopefully put our resources to the best use for the district.
That's great. Thank you.
It's interesting to think about it as TAs as well as teachers. But, and I'm with Sarah, the question is, what does the data say in terms of retention, loss, ability to attract, to fill these positions? That's really the question that has come up. Title I was another area, right? It was EC Title I, and I think ESL were the areas that we wondered about, that we've asked in the past about this. Anything else?
I just want to thank the team, Dr. Jones and her team, for everything they're doing and the hard work they're doing, to really think about our teachers, our students, and our staff, and making sure that everybody gets uplifted, like Carrie said, and really be more financially sustainable with working with trying to make lemonade without lemons. And how other districts have special taxes, and we're doing the best we can. And I just want to thank everybody, and we'll do the best we can with what we have. And I hope that we can give everybody raises. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, I just want to, Dr. Jones, it's been almost a year now, and we have the dream team. Fred and Jeff are part of it, and I think what I saw tonight was a level of, your job is getting harder every year. There's no question, but what I saw tonight was a level of quality of content and discussion that was really exciting to see. So thank you so much for raising the bar, and kind of raising the bar for us as a board to say, being transparent about the real issues, about what we're really facing, and driving a really thoughtful. And thank you to the board, everybody, for engaging in such a thoughtful way. That was a great conversation. Is there anything else? I think, Dr. Jones, you have the things that people asked about, so is there anything else that we need to cover? 8 minutes early. Are we good? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Will?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Carrie? Carrie? Anne?
Yes.
Andre?
Yes.
Me, yes. We're adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Stay safe.
You too.
Thank you all very much.